Is there a specific case conceptualization underlying CRM?
Yes, which I believe is really important, that when we're working with trauma and all trauma modalities that are in the world, as far as the ones that I'm aware of, are extremely beneficial in many ways. However, I have found that in CRM, it's been extremely helpful, and this is a little bit different from some other work out there. We have a very specific, very complex, layered conceptualization of what is needed to heal a person from beginning to end in a way that sticks. And that conceptualization informs the intuitive use of the model. The model itself does have protocols in it, at least in the trainings. But once a person becomes immersed in this model, it's driven by intuition. But the intuition is informed by our conceptualization. So I'm just going to go over a few of the aspects of our case conceptualization that we are constantly tracking when we're working with a client. We're looking at the overarching goal is to improve relationship to self, getting a person into right relationship with themselves, first and foremost, beyond any other relationships to others or the community or the collective. So we begin by conceptualizing, what is their relationship with themselves? Do they even have one? Or is their focus fully on, how do I get my needs met from other people? How do I feel okay about myself relative to the relationships I'm in with other people? And in CRM conceptualization, the more beneficial way of living, of being, is being in right relationship with the self first and foremost. And that means no judgment of the self, 100% complete acceptance of all aspects of the self, the ability to, and the willingness to be co-conscious with all aspects of the self and how those aspects and parts of ourselves operate to keep us safe, to keep us feeling powerful, to keep us feeling like we exist, and to keep the focus away from the pain that we carry. We track this co-consciousness, this awareness of how the client operates internally in relationship to self, primarily across the entire treatment course. And it's the underlying or overarching conceptualization that determines what decisions we make from a very micro level of what breath work to use, what intervention to use, all the way out, including the blocks and obstacles to healing, the blocks and obstacles to treatment, the activation of perpetrator parts to avoid actual true healing. And it's that relationship to self that is the primary goal, as well as the fundamental point of focus that indicates where a client is in treatment. We're also looking at conceptually and tracking the relationship to one's physical body, their ability to be fully in their body, and how is their physical body expressing the trauma that's been dissociated, whether that's through chronic medical conditions, disease process, or a literal disconnection and numbing out from the body itself. Both of these issues, relationship to self and relationship to embodiment, are related to conceptualizing one's level of dissociation. Every human being is dissociative to some extent. In this model, though, the use of the model and how the flow of the model and the healing work progresses is determined by one's accurate assessment and ability as a therapist to work in an intimate way, a very nuanced way with a person's dissociative system. And that, I believe, is one of the keys to the effectiveness of the model, is understanding how dissociation works, regardless of how a person presents. Many people present as extremely high functioning, very educated, very good jobs, very articulate, seemingly everything looks fine. But if you look under the hood, there's definitely a lot of dissociation, a lot of life interference, a lot of internal pain, and kind of hidden secret mechanisms at play, which can block the healing, block the work itself, and block authenticity. So we want to be looking at the level of dissociation and how we are able to connect and have a relationship with the parts of that person's system so that they themselves can become more integrated and more aware of themselves with love. Part of that is being able to identify, develop, fine-tune the presence of a leader, a part of us that is very clear thinking, rational, willing to do the practice at home, willing to take care of ourselves, again, rather than looking for other people to validate that we're okay and to soothe us and calm us and make us feel that there is nothing to look at. And so the only way to really get to that level of autonomy and authenticity is to encourage a client to be able to get to that place where they are aware that their true, rational, clear thinking aspect of self is separate and able to observe and make good choices from a place of free will that allow for a healing process rather than just allowing their symptoms, i.e. their parts, their ego states, to just kind of run free without any kind of conscious awareness or choices to manage any of that. Another really big part of our conceptualization is the attachment history and the templates of defense responses that we create in response to our attachment trauma. We're also looking at paradoxes. Paradoxes show up in people all the time. In fact, it feels to me that 90% of the practice, my clinical work, is working with people's obstacles, blocks, and fears to the work itself, as well as to actual ultimate healing, because of what that can mean for their lives to stay in integrity with their healing, and they don't want those changes. That's a big problem that will affect the entire course of treatment. The second thing, though, that I feel like I'm constantly working with is paradoxes. And paradoxes are the state of the opposing opposites that are present at the same time. So people are holding the tension of these opposites for which there seems to be no solution. And these opposites can be belief systems. They can be paradoxical neurobiology and neurochemistry, the dissociative part systems that in and of themselves work against or with each other from a foundation of paradox. Very difficult to work through. And the paradoxes maintain the obstacles and blocks to treatment and healing, facilitate and maintain the strength of the paradoxes. So those things work together, the fear of the work, the paradoxes, and they're constant. Because even though people say they want to heal, a huge percentage of them is very frightened of the consequences of the healing and the healing process itself. Finally, we're looking at the victim, perpetrator, rescuer triangle, which is, I learned it through Colin Ross's trauma model, and how he works with that. And in CRM, we are constantly tracking the relationship within a person's internal landscape relative to victim, perpetrator, and failed rescuer aspects of self. In CRM, we do believe that the perpetrator aspects are the most important to focus on, because those are the aspects that seem to drive the the depth and the screwed inness of victim and failed rescuer. So in CRM, one of the conceptualizations is to get a client to a place where they're willing and able and resourced enough to actually get to the roots of their perpetration activities, their perpetration imprints, what caused that, the choice point that flipped them into perpetrator activities, all of the experiences of being a perpetrator, the consequences, and how that can then flip into victimization. A perpetrator oftentimes presents as a major victim consciousness and a lot of failed rescuers. So we're working with all three of those concepts, but in particular focusing on what no one wants to look at, which is self as perpetrator. And that's either in a nuanced, subtle way, sophisticated way that most people don't even catch in themselves or in others, as well as the more overt perpetration. So those are just they're the primary conceptualization pieces that we're tracking from the moment a client steps into our office until the day they are discharged. And all of these aspects are what allow us to do really thorough work without colluding with the client's system in escaping and not looking at aspects that are in fact blocking and creating diversions away from true healing.